All right, welcome back to the Stan Simpson Show. Time to talk a little politics. The presidential elections are heating up. I'm joined by a panel of experts here. Chris Keating, Hartford Courant Capitol Bureau Chief. Bilal Sakou, the Associate Professor at the University of Hartford. Arthur O'Neill, Republican, Southbury, the longest-serving Republican, I think, in the House. Do I have that right?
That's right.
You're a veteran. All right, so we have the GOP politics heating up. You saw Chris Christie and Romney. Now, what surprises me, Romney's been running for president for probably 5 years plus, but yet he still has to define himself at his convention. Why is that? Don't we know who Mitt Romney is? Why does he have to define himself now? Shouldn't we know who this guy is?
Well, I think that he's been campaigning for a long time, talking about various kinds of issues, but I think a lot of people don't focus in on who the candidates are until it gets to this point. Up till now, there have been candidates coming onto the scene. They have a few lines they deliver, have a couple of songs they sing, and then they exit stage right. So I think the voters frequently don't really focus on these candidates until they get to this convention point, and then the candidate now has to introduce himself to the vast majority of voters who just start paying attention now.
So who is this guy, from your vantage point? Who is Mitt Romney, and why should he be president?
Well, I think he's obviously a successful governor of the state of Massachusetts. He's a successful manager of the Olympics that we had in Salt Lake City. He's a very successful businessman. So he's someone who's been very successful at handling very complicated problems. When he took over as governor of Massachusetts, they had many problems similar to the ones we've had here in the state of Connecticut. And he addressed those issues, and in a state which is not really very heavily Republican in any way, was able to get things through the Massachusetts state legislature controlled by Democrats, and was able to forge bipartisan legislation that I think served the people of the state of Massachusetts very well. So I think he's been very successful at handling governmental situations.
What's the elephant in the room, so to speak? A little pun on words here, the GOP. I thought it was funny, Keating. What's pretty good, right, elephant? You get that, Keating? You got that elephant in the room, GOP? Yeah. You didn't get that. But what's the elephant in the room with Mitt Romney? When you talk about, you have this bad economy, people who will admit that they're no better than they were 4 years ago. Why wouldn't Mitt Romney be further ahead in the polls? Why wouldn't there be a big gap between him and the incumbent, who most people are saying, well, gee, we're not really doing a whole lot better?
I mean, I think, the original premise of your question about, here's a guy who's been running for president. This is his second time through in a very significant way. He was quite a substantial candidate the first time he ran. And yet he still needs to define himself for people. Of course, some of this is just the general narrative of what political conventions are about. A candidate sort of gets defined at the convention, and somehow in that next couple months you see this real serious push, nationally with this candidate, and they're able to tell their story and really define themselves the way they would like to be defined. I think that's really what the key is that the convention allows the candidate to say, okay, here's who I am, and this is what I want you to see me over the next several months. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, at this point, given the state of the economy, the expectation is that, Republicans would probably be out ahead of the president. And so I think there are still some questions about Romney, about his record, even though the representative certainly lauds his record in Massachusetts. I think there's still questions out there about his activities, his business activities, about his governance, the policies. I think there's still question marks out there that a lot of people have.
Having his wife, Ann Romney, give a speech at the convention, that help him, sort of soften the image, add some context. What were your thoughts on, did that help or hurt him?
Yeah, I think Ann Romney's speech was generally well received. People do need that, and I do agree with the two panelists. People are just starting to cue in now on some of them. Politics is very much like professional football and the Super Bowl. There's people who don't watch a game the whole year, but they make sure they watch the Super Bowl. And they not only watch the Super Bowl, they bet on it. They think they know what they're talking about. All right, people, the whole year, you got people following Herman Cain and Michelle Bachmann, and a lot of people not paying attention. Now, suddenly, people are paying attention. This reintroducing themselves, that'll be a relatively quick thing. Right. Then we'll get into the debates, et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically going at the pace that it should be going at, but the general public is queuing in now.
But wives play an important role. People look and project the next First Lady. Your thoughts, Mr. O'Neill, how did she do this week, Miss Romney?
I think she did excellent. I've seen her speak in person and then watched her on TV last night at the convention, and she was just the same person on TV that she was in person when I listened to her speak at a Republican event. And that's unusual to some extent. People frequently translate differently on television from the way they look and act in person.
Compelling personal story, right? Going through some
Very
bad health
so.
issues.
Serious health problems, overcoming those, dealing with the problems that she had in her family. I mean, the starting life as many people do, not with tremendous prosperity, but starting out basically humble origins kind of thing. So I think that she was able to tell a story that many Americans can relate to, and also that people understand that she is a real person and not just some figure they see on TV. And I think that was very important, and that she helped make Mitt Romney, I think, more of a real person, a more rounded person, rather than just the public figure standing at the podium delivering a speech about some complex policy issue.
Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, he also spoke at the convention. Did he elevate his stature? Do you think he delivered the red meat? Did he put himself in a higher profile when all is said and done?
There's been varying viewpoints on him. One of the interesting points that I saw, the first 17 minutes, he did not mention Romney in the first 17 minutes. So people were wondering exactly what he was talking about. He did talk about his roots, and he talked about his parents, and he talked about himself, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think by the time he got around to the end, he said all the things that the Romney campaign wanted him to say. One thing you have to remember is that Romney and the campaign, they vet every single word that these guys say. So there's really no surprises to the campaigns. They know exactly they knew exactly what Mrs. Romney was going to say. They knew what Christie's going to say, and the whole convention, they knew every single word that everybody was going to say.
In about 30 seconds, Mr. Rugg, ahead.
You know, part of what also makes this interesting is that when you think about how is a candidate, and I think really redefine is not the word to use. I think he's really trying to define himself for people. He's trying to define himself for certainly undecideds. But I think what's troubling right now for Republicans, he's also defining himself for a base that really isn't sure about him yet. Certainly the Ryan addition to the ticket was an effort to try to sort of get some of that base to come on board. So I think the challenge for him right now is there are a lot of folks in the party who are wondering about Mormonism, who are wondering about, you know, is this a guy who really can relate to sort of the working class part of the base, which is growing, especially among white males. Is this a guy we can connect to? And so part of what Romney has to do is to define himself as being someone who can lead the party, but also someone who can connect to that base of folks in the party who are uncertain about him at this moment.
As far as the Big Ten, you saw polls out there where African Americans, maybe 2% at best, from 0% to 2% supported Romney. How problematic is that when the Republicans talk about a big tent? What does that mean? That's an extraordinary number, that he's not connecting at all with that segment of the population.
Well, the Republicans, I don't necessarily think, I'd like to know what the numbers were in 2008. I don't think it's all that different from the last go-round. There was a lot of support for Obama in 2008. Yes, is that a problem for Republicans? I guess yes, but it's been a problem for a while.
All right, we're going to hold that thought, come back with more of the Stan Simpson Show. We'll talk about what's happening on the local political scene. Don't go away. Remember, catch our show 24/7, ctnow.com/Stan. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Don't go away.